Dominic. Welcome to the Comic Book Report. We've got another interview for you guys, straight from Brandon Montclare. Super happy to have you, Brandon. Thank you so much for the time today.
Thanks for having me on, Dominic.
Awesome. And a special thank you to all of our contacts over at Dynamite Entertainment for helping arrange the interview. Among the things I want to talk to Brandon about today is the upcoming Ducktales series. And I guess so we don't bury the lead, I was hoping maybe we could actually get started there. How did this series kind of drop in your radar, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, it's not really that different than most series. I was Nate Cosby, who's the editor, reached out to me and said, "Hey, interested in doing a Disney book?" And I was familiar with Dynamite. It was actually a while ago. So it was almost a year ago.
Oh, wow.
At this point, but it was already that Dynamite had been putting out a couple of the titles already, getting good reviews, getting good buzz. Obviously, I always try to keep an eye on the kid stuff. And I've been working a lot on like in the book market stuff, like original graphic novels and publishers with some delays. But even without the delays, that stuff goes really slow. I hadn't been on a monthly book in a long time. Like I said, but whenever there's a kid's book in the direct market, because I grew up on all the Marvel and DC and Image and Dark Horse and Vertigo and everything else like that stuff also. So I'm always interested in kind of like the Wednesday comics. So it was just a matter of, it would be kind of cool. Dynamite's doing kids books. So, it's what people kind of call me for a lot. I wouldn't mind if they called me to do like, Moon Knight slicing someone's head off either. But or Hulk getting really angry, right? But I like doing kids books a lot. I got 2 little kids. So, I was really just interested already in doing something. I like a lot of the Disney stuff that's like really classic, whether it's like Snow White or Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck or something like that.
Yeah.
I have a 15-year-old now is my oldest, and my second daughter is 8. So anything from about the last 15 years, I've seen, and I like some of that stuff. In between, I'm sure there's a lot of good stuff. A couple of things I like. A lot of it I'm not too familiar with, right? So I said, well, let me see. Usually when you have those conversations, you have a couple of characters that you talk about, right? And go through it. But he said DuckTales, and I said yes. It was that quick. I mean, it's a really cool character to work on, and I'm very happy to do it because it's not so much with maybe even American comic fans, but certainly the everyday civilian. It might not be as familiar with how popular Uncle Scrooge is overseas and in Europe, especially, in all other places. And obviously going all the way back to Carl Barks, 60 years ago, 75 years ago? No, I don't even know. But it was really just an honor to work on Carl Barks' book that he established, and Don Rosa, obviously, and everybody else who worked on it. But also have enough of that distance where it's DuckTales. So it's not like, who do you think you are? Because it's such great cartoonists, right? Who are associated with that title. And, I'm old enough that I remember DuckTales. I with everything else that came out around that era, as much as I love He-Man, I don't know that all that stuff holds up as well as DuckTales. Yeah, so it was like, everything I could possibly want to do. It was, like I said, it was always going to be set in. And this, I don't know if it's officially known. It's not that it's a secret, but it's definitely locked into the 1987 cartoon continuity. So it doesn't have anything from the reboot. But in my mind, because so much of the classic Uncle Scrooge stuff was in DuckTales, we get to pull most all of that in. So it's really to me, it's kind of like the iconic. It's like it'd be like turning down writing Batman for DC or Spider-Man for Marvel. It's crazy not to do it. So.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to hear this. I'm a child of the early 90s, so I felt like we had DuckTales in syndication already by the time I was a young kid. And that theme song is the best. It's on my Mount Rushmore of great cartoon theme songs, obviously.
Because, in real life, maybe I'm like I say this, somebody, especially because, people my age who have kids who are my age, so other parents, I should say. What are you doing? It's not a comics, and they kind of know, and I do a lot with the school. So there was but when it comes to, what are you working on now? It's DuckTales. They all start singing the song. So
Yeah,
as much,
Woo!
as much as you can say, as much as you can say, Uncle Scrooge is this iconic comics Mount Rushmore character. And if you don't believe me, go to Italy or go to the Netherlands, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Go down the street and you say DuckTales, and somebody in their 40s or 50s or thereabouts is going to start singing the song. And younger, too, obviously, because it existed in syndication. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love what you said of kind of feeling like it almost sounds like you're in kind of a sweet spot, right? Where you get to tap into the legacy of this huge Ducks comics, like again, like just legacy, but at the same time, DuckTales is far enough removed that you can play in the sandbox, you can take risks, you can do all these things without feeling like maybe you're stepping on the Don Rosa toes or Carl Barker. I don't know.
That's just it. I think you can do a lot creatively on the page with that attitude. But as you said too, it's like, well, I can't really go wrong because it's like, it's like, it's like I'm not trying to be Carl Barks. I'm trying to be DuckTales, and it's DuckTales. Oh, but no, look how cool DuckTales really is. It's Carl Barks. And so I'm kind of not that I get nervous about things, but if I were the type to have anxiety, I would be. I could find the sweet spot just for myself to sit in to not get kind of overwhelmed by the whole thing.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I love hearing kind of your background with that. I don't know a ton about you personally, but I know how I was first kind of aware of you was your connection to Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. I know that that's a really big like franchise IP now, obviously. So I guess my question, you kind of touched on it earlier with DuckTales, was you sound like you're drawn to a lot of like kid-centric demographics for a lot of these works. And I couldn't tell from your answer, is it in large part because of your children and your children's age? Or like you said, like you kind of encountered some of this stuff when you were younger as well? Like what makes this such a narrative sweet spot for you, at least until you get that Moon Knight we talked about a moment ago?
Yeah. No, like I think practically speaking, it was just the opportunities. I did a book called Rocket Girl for Image Comics, and it did pretty well. And I'm very proud of the book. I think it holds up a lot. But I think so basically, it's kind of like a chain of events. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur is really now why I'm completely associated with the kid genre, because it's not something everyone can do, and I can do it.
Sure.
But I think the reason I mentioned Rocket Girl is because very much the reason an editor hires me on DuckTales is because they said, "Oh, I liked your work on Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur." Same thing was to get Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. They said, "Oh, we really like your work on Rocket Girl," which isn't a kid's book. Main characters are teens, but it's a little more like an '80s teen movie. You know what I mean? It's more 16 Candles than anything else. Which obviously with science fiction and action, but and nobody of all the creators and Marvel included didn't think we'd do 4 years of 50 issues of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. It was just just kind of took off, and it existed as a kid's book, but really an all ages book. I try to get all my stuff in, not just because I hope it doesn't read like kids literature, which too often I think tries to appeal to like the parents who are buying the books for their kids. Yeah, but the Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur is what opened the doors, and then there's two things that reason I stick with it. First of all, it's, like I said, business is business, so they associate you with something, they offer it to you. It's kind of initially built. Maybe if my first stuff was Moon Knight, then I'd be doing like horror now and monster stuff, and superheroes, right? But I do very much like writing because I've been doing Moon Girl since because it's going to be the 10th anniversary of Moon Girl next year. And
wow, congratulations.
Yeah. So I've been doing it since my oldest daughter was like 5 or 6, and my youngest daughter wasn't even born yet, So I do like having stuff for kids, for girls, because I have girls, that appeals to that. But another part of it, and in doing this, meaning the stuff I've done for the last 9 years now, I guess, I remember how much as a kid, like I worked on a lot of good books. I was an editor at DC Comics. I was an assistant editor. I worked for Bob Schreck, who only had like 100% A+ books, and then Karen Berger, who ran Vertigo. So I was like the assistant editor on All-Star Superman, All-Star Batman, but Paul
Yeah.
Pope's Batman Year 100, a lot of Matt Wagner stuff that I'm a big fan of. Just
Yeah,
the regular Batman title at Vertigo, like on Day Tripper. I was the guy, I was the first one to do Jeff Lemire's Sweet Tooth. We brought that into Vertigo. So it's all these classic books that are great and timeless books. And as somebody who's read comics for an entire life, 40 plus years that I've been reading comics, it's amazing how good those books are. Yeah. But I came to a realization that as much as I like All-Star Superman, I'll pick that because that's the award winner, right?
Yeah.
As much as 40-year-old Brandon likes All-Star Superman, 12-year-old Brandon liked whatever goofy book I was reading so much more. You know what I mean? It was so
Sure.
Like, so if it was an issue of Savage Sword of Conan, or like I said, Moon Knight, I always thought was a cool character. I often bring up West Coast Avengers because my brother had a subscription to it. Older brothers. And one point, somehow, we were allowed to get subscriptions. And I got Gru, and I'm a big fan of Gru, and I stand behind that 100% as a great all ages book. But but he got West Coast Avengers, and I don't know that West Coast Avengers holds up. Just like I don't know if He-Man holds up. All due respect to Al Milgrom and everyone else who I love who worked on Big John Byrne, whatever. Obviously I can talk West Coast Avengers a good long time, so I'm not trying to disrespect it. But 12-year-old Brandon loved West Coast Avengers more than 40-something Brandon loved All-Star Superman. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, 100%. I love that.
When you work for kid stuff, it's something like, I think, the music, even if you don't work in comics, obviously comics, we surround ourselves with kid stuff maybe our whole lives. But the music you listen to at a certain age, the movies you've seen, that type of stuff, it really sticks with you. So to be working for that audience, like seriously, like I wouldn't change it, It would be nice to mix it up with, like I said, the Moon Knight slicing some ancient Egyptian god's head off would be cool. I usually say, I'm trying to mix it up because I usually always say, Punisher fighting Wolverine in the sewer with a lot of
there nature. You go. Yeah.
And that would be fun. But, the stuff I'm working on now, I really like, because, like I said, the daughters that I have, but even more so, the audience that it reaches, it means a lot to them.
Yeah.
And that's a special thing for a creator, I think.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I just even think like how many like young audience members are like, these are probably some of their first books, like everyone remembers their first reads. You remember West Coast Avengers and some of those things that just got in at that time where they almost become like core memories, I love that. I love that so much.
If you and even with like Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur was always interesting. And this is like, Marvel telling me it. They always kind of compared to, they always had the analogy of Spider-Man and Hawkeye. Spider-Man sells a lot of comics, and Hawkeye sells copies, but not as many as Spider-Man. But by and large, obviously there's exceptions, but everyone who reads Hawkeye also reads Spider-Man. But as far as they could tell from the people reading and buying the book, a lot of people who read Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, and it sold much more as the trade paperback and was distributed in like Scholastic Book Fairs. There's a whole history behind it. But a lot of the people who read Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, that's the only book from Marvel that they read. So that's like I said, it's an interesting place to be. And to me, it's like you say, you try to get the best of all worlds, like I was saying before. And one of my dreams with Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur says, well, if we can get a certain amount of issues, that'd be cool. But said, I don't know if you've ever seen it. And they've done it so many different times. There's that big giant, like they had a white background poster from it was all the covers of like the Marvel Universe put together, the second edition of it. And Hannigan art, I think did it all. So the whole Marvel, I said, hey man, it would be cool. Like next time they do a big poster, if Moon Girl's in there with Devil Dinosaur. Devil Dinosaur was created by Jack Kirby. But I co-created Moon Girl with Amy Reeder and Natasha Bustos, and and then there's a nice it comes up a couple times, but there's a nice big Alex Ross poster, and in the background there's Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. So on the fan level, cool. Also, to me it's kind of a little bit of everything.
That is so awesome. I loved hearing a little more about that. Like I said, like that was kind of the property I was most familiar with for you. So I'd love to get a little bit behind the curtain with that. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
if you don't mind me pivoting somewhat, what you were talking about actually had me thinking. Wondering if you don't mind sharing a little bit, what has your journey been like in the industry? You know, you've already talked about kind of being an editor. Now, obviously, you're functioning, I'm assuming, solely as a writer for
Right.
comics, or do you
Mhm.
kind of facilitate any other roles or anything? Or how did that process begin for you, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I've been working in comics a real long time.
Mhm.
Before freshman year of high school, so eighth grade. So I guess I was 13. Um,
Wow.
I was working. I grew up outside of New York City. If you're familiar with
Okay.
like the suburbs, right? 30 minutes north of the city. I live in New York City now, but when I
Okay.
was a kid, I grew up north of the city, but close enough that you have access to the city. So at 13, I started selling comics from my collection and buying and selling at like local comic conventions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did that for a long, long time. And then by the time I was 19, a store in my hometown, it's called Alternate Realities in Scarsdale. I was there for a long time after this, but this would have been like the mid 90s when all the
Okay.
stores started getting into trouble, and you had a big implosion with Marvel's bankruptcy and all that stuff around.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
because of all that kind of chaos, a lot of places were in trouble. And I was able to buy into that store at 19 for not a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. So I worked retail so I did like the comic stuff. I've been employed basically in one way or another since 13. But yeah, so
Wow.
at 19, I opened the store. It was a lot of work. It was a bad market, but the market started to come around, and we did some
Sure.
good stuff there. I owned half of it. And then, as cool as it was at 19, I didn't find it that cool in my mid 20s.
Sure.
So my wife is totally different than me. She's a chemical engineer. She has a PhD in
Wow.
chemistry.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she was doing what they call a postdoc. So she was up in,
Okay.
except I mean, I guess I can brag for her. She got a PhD from Yale University, and then went to
Wow.
she was going to Cal. She had an opportunity to go to Caltech for 2 years before kind of finding like a tenure track position. I don't know if this makes sense to people who aren't in academics, which is a PhD, right? And so she had an opportunity to go out to Caltech, which is outside of Los Angeles in Pasadena,
Mhm.
for 2 years. And I said, I'm kind of, I'm a dumb comic guy, but it's like, I'm kind, I don't know if I want to own a store. I love stores, but for me, I
Yeah.
didn't know if I wanted to do it forever. It's a lot of hours. You kind of hit your
Sure.
head on the ceiling at a certain point. So I went
Yeah.
out there. I went back to school, and I got an internship actually. And I was, like I said, a little old to be an intern, but back then I had a young face. So I got an internship at Tokyo Pop, which
Wow. Okay.
remember, yeah, for manga. And Tokyo Pop was an interesting place because almost nobody there had a history in comics. A few did, but most people came out of like the book and magazine
Oh,
trade.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so that I knew comics, like it was the Wild West. It was like, authority wasn't given, it was assumed. So all of a sudden I'm in charge of, because they were also at this point, which was cool, trying to do original material in the manga style. So you had a lot of young artists submit. And I was like, oh, you want to be in charge of all the submissions or go through them all and that type of stuff. So I had a lot of good hands-on experience because, like I said, it was a company that was growing very fast. It actually collapsed very fast too, unfortunately. But I was just like, I said, I was an intern, and then I was hired as an assistant editor, entry level position.
Wow.
But it was fun, and learned a lot because that was good. And from there moved back to New York. My wife got a position at NYU where she's still a professor. But coming back to New York, it's like, I had a couple of options. I had an offer from Marvel and DC, but DC, as I mentioned before, those are a lot of good titles, and I knew those were the titles I would work on. And part of me said, well, you don't really edit those things. You know what I mean? You just kind of traffic manage, because I'm not telling Grant Morrison how to write a script or Jim Lee how to draw a cover. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was just such great books to be associated with. I took the job at DC. Then my first daughter was born, and I had some stability, and I said, well, now a lot of people can work from home, but geez, it was probably 15 years ago. How long ago was All-Star Superman? Don't even tell me. But,
a little bit.
So I was there. I was at DC for a little under 5 years, and I had done some writing while I was out in California working for Tokyo Pop. It's kind of demystified it as an editor. I said, I can kind of do some of this stuff, and got an 8-page backup in the Hulk, and then a couple more gigs, and a little bit here and there, and to Rocket Girl, which was a nice success, to Moon Girl, to this. Those are the major points as a writer.
Sure. And that actually kind of leads me into another pivot I'm hoping to do, if that's okay. I love hearing all this, and thank you for just sharing so candidly. I love hearing people.
I can talk about myself all day long, so yeah.
Well, I'm here for it. I appreciate your time, and I guess for me, as someone who, I'm really surprised that you started in like the retail sector and kind of the entrepreneurial business owner side. Like I don't hear that often, which is really cool. And then pivoting to Tokyo Pop and all these like editorial positions. But I guess for me, a question I have, and again, now that you're functioning as a writer and have been for some time, was it like an aspiration or a goal for you to write in comics? Or is that something that kind of happened out of, you were in editorial and you're like, oh, this might be a space I want to play in? Like, did you always want to write, or is that kind of something that happened along the way?
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's a good question, but
there are quite a few people who first of all, there's quite a few people who've worked retail who wind up on the creative side of things. So
that's awesome.
I just know that I live a couple blocks away from Forbidden Planet in New York City.
Yeah.
Matt Rosenberg was there, and now he's writing a ton of stuff. So I knew him as a guy who worked at Forbidden Planet. Vida Ayala worked at Forbidden Planet, Danny Lore. So that's just one shop a couple of blocks away that while I was a professional, I guess it was after I was at DC, so I was writing at the time. But a lot of people work that way. And a lot of people come from editorial. I was the last, I started downstairs, which is, at DC downstairs, like DC Universe, superhero stuff. Upstairs was Vertigo. So I went up to Vertigo. Cliff Chang was an assistant editor a couple of years before me.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it's obviously opens a lot of doors. But I loved editing. I really did, because, if you're an artist, and I can't draw, but if I could, I'd say, well, what am I going to do? Work on one book a month? If you're a writer, maybe you can do 3. If you're prolific, you can obviously do a couple more. But if you're an editor, you get to work on 10 books. And not only you get to, like I said, you get to work with all kinds of people, all kinds of things. Wow. So to me, I just like comics so much that I could work with not just those big names, but I gave like early work to obviously Amy Reeder, Sean Murphy, a lot of cool people that came up. Got to give opportunities to also. So editing is fantastic, but it's a 9-to-5 job. And, the way it was put to me when I was kind of weighing Marvel and DC, this was by someone at DC. They say DC is really a place you want to end your career, not begin it, because it is much more structured. And it was, and I didn't really pay too much. I'm glad I made the decision I did, because Shrek and I are like, I can't think any more highly of anybody than Bob Shrek.
Awesome.
But it's like, if you're a big senior guy, it's good to be at DC. Tokyo Pop, I got to do so much that I just wasn't allowed to do at DC, right? And Marvel's probably been a little bit more like that Wild West mentality. But it's the long answer to your question, but I loved editing. I had done some writing at Tokyo Pop almost by necessity, because they had artists that like couldn't write, you know what I mean? So let's see if these guys are any good. And like, so write them. So we would have space in the back of our translated manga.
Sure.
And can you write a 4-page story and give it to this guy who didn't quite, because there used to be this, it's a long story, but there used to be this book anthology called Rising Stars of Manga. And like a competition where writer artists or teams or whatever could kind of compete and apply to, and we'd print like the top 10, and they came out twice a year. And even if you didn't make the book, if you were really good, it was kind of a way to evaluate talent for Tokyo.
Awesome. Yeah.
And so some of those guys were like, oh, well, like, let's give them a chance, have them write a script, and no one else was going to do it. So I don't even think I ever got paid for any of those scripts. And then also a way to pick up extra money at Tokyo Pop was to translate. And I can't speak Japanese, but it's very expensive to get someone who can like read Japanese and is fluent in Japanese, but also write very well. So they would do like a 2-step process at Tokyo Pop where they like and this is obviously before you could just probably scan it and press a button and
Google Translate or something.
Translate it out. So you get this really rough, and I'm not even saying it's like not fit for publishing. It was very very broken. It was like broken English, you know what I mean? Like, so
Sure.
because it was less expensive that way. So they would get this kind of raw translation, and then they would have, they would freelance out, okay, do the rewrite. And, so you make it, you kind of localize it, you make it into a good read for the fans.
Wow.
And I got some of those gigs. That's kind of a good way to break in, right? Because you're not worried about storytelling, the plot, or anything else. All you're doing is kind of getting the words on the page. So that was an experience. So I had that experience, and I was good at it, I suppose. But I didn't really have any chance where I'd be like a standout, where someone would discover my stuff and give me, some kind of gig. But I always liked writing. I at one point, because it was my first daughter was born, and so I had I stayed there for less than a year after she was born, because my wife had her maternity leave and everything else, and that was kind of running out. So I said, well, maybe I should go back. There's a very senior editor at DC said, if you want to get promoted, you should just leave and come back, because if you stay, then they keep you there. But if another position opens up and you're gone, whether it's at Marvel or DC, and you go back and forth, but even if you stay at DC, his advice was, everyone likes you, so you'll get hired if you go and come back in 3 years, you'll be in a better position than if you stay here for the next 3 years. So, I don't know, I did want to write, but I guess maybe it was kind of a mix of, well, I love editing and I can come back to it. And that's maybe that was just a safety net if the writing didn't work out. But the writing worked out. So,
okay. Wow. Okay. Well, that's fascinating too. Do you find, only if you feel comfortable, but do you find in general you would enjoy your function vocationally as a writer more than editor, or is it kind of comparing just two different worlds? Does that make sense too?
It's editing, you have a boss. I guess you do as a writer too, but if you're not in charge of everything, and why should I be in charge of anything? I was the dope intern at Tokyo Pop. You know what I mean? So I'm not trying to say I deserve more, but when you're not, it's a lot of structure. It's a lot of levels.
Sure.
So on a practical, like pure editing, like if I had the team that I wanted on the book that I wanted, it's a lot of fun, and I would be very satisfied. But some of the practicalities get in the way. Whereas writer, you have to work for an editor. Obviously, you have to work for a publisher. You have to do all these things. But you have a little bit more freedom for that. And so in that sense, I like it. I really do like the act of writing. Actually sit and write is good, except when I'm late, and I get late too often on stuff.
Sure.
But when I'm not late, it's physically enjoyable to write for me.
Awesome.
So in that sense, it's pretty good. And now it's like, now it's like, I certainly couldn't, I certainly don't want to go back to a 9-to-5 job or anything like that. So,
so
it's a good fit. If someone said, hey, do you want to edit this anthology or do something like that? Yeah, I would jump at it. And I have had people kind of ask, or I've done a little bit of that stuff. So,
very cool. I love that you're wearing all these, you can wear all these different hats within this industry. That's awesome. Okay, so just another question or two, and then I don't want to take up too much of your time, so we'll start landing the plane, so to speak. But I've been curious about this when I've talked to some other creators or have had the opportunities to interview them. Is there like dream collaborators you hope to work with sometime? Like if you had an opportunity, and it might be specific based on what you're writing, but is there like a collaborator in this industry you would love to like work with someday? Or is there anyone on your short list you're like, this would be really fun to try to do this kind of project with this X, Y, or Z? No, there definitely is. You worry about saying that, right? Because what if I don't say something? It's like sometimes like when people ask me like who my favorite current writers, I say, well, I'll talk about people I like, and that's kind of what you're asking. So you're kind of like within the realm. But then I also kind of feel like, who am I going to leave out? But what's very true, and what I can safely say, is there's tons of people I have worked with that I'd like to work again. I did 1,000 pages of Moon Girl, most of those with Natasha Bustos. I would love to work with Natasha again. We always plan, and maybe it's always right over the horizon where we might do something. It's right over the horizon now, but I don't want to say it because it's been right over the horizon. Sure.
But people I've worked with only a little bit that I loved working with and would love to work with more. It runs the gamut. There's If you look up Gustavo Duarte, who did did a couple of kids book like the Dear Superman, and then they had a sequel to that. He did like Bizarro, a book a few years ago for DC. I really like Gustavo's stuff a lot. And the opposite of this Tommaso Ronda, who's working on DuckTales with me. I write something down, and Tommaso does it exactly like I saw it in my head, just better, which is like the A+ for that's what every writer searches for. I did 2 issues of Moon Girl, 2 special issues. One was the Christmas issue, and one was like a Thor tie-in, but we just did a Thor flashback. So it was a cool out of continuity Thor story. I gave Gustavo my scripts, and unlike anybody I've ever worked with, it's like I don't even like he took stuff out, he moved it all worked, you know what I mean? Like the dialogue didn't have to change or anything else, but it wasn't at all what I saw the first time. But I really liked it a lot. But I said, man, but it wasn't like a Bill Sienkiewicz story where they say, I don't know if it's true, but there's a there's a legend that he drew stuff for Frank Miller. And then Frank Miller said, well, I don't even know what to do with this. So Frank Miller took all of the pages that drew and then put them in different order and then did a new story. I don't know how much of that is true and how much of that is fanciful.
Oh, I want to believe it.
Yeah, exactly. You want to believe it, right? So it wasn't like it was just like, wow. So, Gustavo, and I tell him this, so this isn't going to be a surprise. I said, I don't know. I like his stuff so much. I like what he does so much. I'm giving him too much because that's sometimes what anybody does, but me particularly. I give him too much. He's not the type of, you got to give him less. So then I did it the second time, the second story. So the first one was like the Christmas issue, and the second one was the Thor issue. I said, I'm going to get it this time. And I totally didn't get it again either. But he's a nice guy. It worked. The final product works. But I am compelled to work with him to figure out how the hell it works, because I don't know how it works. Simon Bisley, who I hired to do covers on Hellblazer, and I did an 8-page story with him. That whole 8-page story was with Simon Bisley. I love Simon Bisley. So you think Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur and DuckTales, the last thing you think of is Simon Bisley. But yeah, if I get that story with Wolverine and the Punisher shooting each other in the street,
there you go. I'd probably check that out.
A character I always wanted to work on for my whole life, who's like you think of as a kid's book, is Robin. And I always thought Robin was cool because he's living the dream. You know what I mean? It's like, everyone, like they used to say, superheroes are adolescent power fantasies. It's every kid that reads a comic and he gets to hang out with Batman and do cool stuff. So just random stuff. I'd like to do Prince Namor also, because wouldn't it be cool to do underwater with fish all around? I think that's so it's all over the map. Yeah.
Love that. Well, hopefully you get the opportunity. I think those are great characters. I'm a fan of Namor for sure. And who doesn't like Robin? I mean, any of the Robins, they're all pretty great. Awesome. Well, hey, I don't want to take too much of your time here, so I think we'll start landing the plane. But thank you so much for your time today, sir. And I know DuckTales is coming out. Do you have the release date for when that's dropping over at Dynamite?
Yeah, DuckTales is out November 6th. So it's on the cover of previews now. So if you're very conversant with how comic shops work, tell your retailer that you want one, because that always helps. It's a great book. It's as much as I got to create Moon Girl for Marvel, and I did my own creator own stuff with Rocket Girl. My approach to DuckTales is and Uncle Scrooge in general. It's a perfect character. It's not reinvented. It's not anything different. It's like if I was writing the Hulk. It's about a guy who is a scientist, and he blacks out when he gets angry, and then all kinds of crazy stuff happens, and then he hopes when he wakes up that he didn't kill anybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doctor Strange to me is simply we have a cool universe of superheroes. What if somebody did magic? So it's like, to me, that's like DuckTales. It's Uncle Scrooge going on on a great adventure with Huey, Dewey, and Louie, who look up to him because, it's hero worship. Who's cooler? Who's a cooler uncle than Uncle Scrooge? Not just for the trillions of dollars, although that's cool too. It's how he got it and all the stories he has. And
Yeah.
then that's also reflected, though, because Scrooge is a bit of a curmudgeon. And he's a
Yep.
little bit more of a curmudgeon in the comics than he was in the cartoon. So we play a
Sure.
little bit of that. But he's also, with all this unbelievable attention and love and excitement that all these kids are look at him with, how does that affect him? Does that soften him a bit and kind of make him a better person too?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the background. Otherwise, it's just going to be booby traps and hidden doors and the Beagle Boys and Magica Dispel and Launchpad McQuack crashing a plane and all that other good stuff.
Well, I love it. I'm excited to hear it. Thank you so much for telling us a little bit about that. You heard them, everyone. Check it out. Get your copies ordered now, dropping in November, I believe, from Dynamite. And Brandon Montclare, thank you again so much for your time. Thanks again to Dynamite. And everyone, hope you have a good one. Thanks.
Dominic, thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview. Thank you for watching The Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, comment, and maybe check out another video on your way out. Have a good one.